Welcome into another episode of Behind the Glass Sports. Glad to be with you, beautiful people, here this evening. I am Aiden Dollins, joined as always by Hardy Graham and Will Miller. And here we are. We are on the other side of it. We are in between the slices of bread. We are currently in the bologna, as it were, the meat and potatoes, the college football season. Games have happened, more than four of them. We've already had one team go from top 10 to completely unranked. I'm not sure that was record time, but it was damn well close to it. So, guys, heck of a start to the season. And I just have two words to get the ball rolling here. Ryan Williams.
Yeah, he's definitely arrived on campus, has made his name known. One of 7 or 8 freshman wide receivers that in the country that put up just some crazy numbers this weekend. 2 receptions, 2 touchdowns. I mean, 139 yards, led all Alabama receivers in receiving yards, so all Alabama players in receiving yards. I'm excited to see what the future holds for this young man because 17 years old doing stuff like that, I mean, it says a lot. The Nick Saban era really kicked into high gear when a player from the 251 made his name known, and I think the Kalen DeBoer era might start the exact same way.
That's a good comparison, Hardy, because I think it was made a lot in the build up to this season with it being a new coach. But if they were to devise an efficiency rating for wide receivers, statistic of that nature, they may already have one.
I'm sure PFF does.
I'm not familiar if so, but he'd definitely blow that stat out of the water after his performance Saturday against Western Kentucky. And that was only one of a handful of things that went right for the Crimson Tide, one of which was not weather, but you can't win them all. And I think that the fan base would unanimously agree they'd rather the wins be on the football field. It was a big one, 63-0 over an overmatched team that did not live up to TJ Finley's billing of how things might play out. And he himself did not live up to it either, being benched in the second quarter. But it was what Alabama fans could hope for. It was what Kalen DeBoer could have hoped for. And now you move on to a game this week that's got a lot more interest than most of these non-conference, non-power 4 games for Alabama that people have so often, they've had so many things to say about these type of games that weren't being said last weekend and that aren't being said this weekend because of what happened last year. Onwards and upwards, as it were, for Alabama, but a good start.
Shout out to the Western Kentucky coach. I don't have his name in front of me because I'm bad at this. But there you go. Shout out to that man for having the gall to go ahead and just, when he's playing like trash, bench your starting quarterback that, was supposed to transfer in and be a big help to your program. And it's just not, working out. Shout out to that guy for having the hair on his nuts to go ahead and just sit him down on the bench before it's even halftime, looking at you, Mike Norvell.
Yeah, TJ Finley talked a lot of smack coming into this game. Said this was going to be a different Western Kentucky team than a lot of fans were expecting to see in this game. The man didn't even hit 100 yards passing. 2 really bad interceptions. The first one was just a pretty much a fantastic play by Keon Saab, who we will get to in a second. But
that first one, I almost thought that maybe his wide receiver was supposed to come back on that route and just didn't.
Maybe. I'm not sure. Either way, the man just did not step up. Played a really tragic game. Quite frankly, when we met last Wednesday, we pointed out some defensive players that we were all very excited to see come into this season. And last week I did mention Jahad Campbell as a guy that would just be a absolute wrecker on defense. That man looked different this past Saturday. He was flying around, looked just as fast as every single running back receiver that Western Kentucky had on the field. was moving sideline to sideline really well. I'm just defense definitely showed out. Western Kentucky just dropped the ball in every single possible way imaginable.
I
Well,
think John Campbell is one of those players that's poised for a breakout, akin to what you saw from Chris Braswell last season, and what a valuable piece he ended up being to that team in multiple different ways. One of the captains of the defense, in addition to his improvement on the field. And that's reflected in now he's on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So good luck to him with the NFL season coming up starting tomorrow.
Yes.
Yes, at long last.
You said he's on the Bucks?
Yeah.
All right. Good luck to him starting in week 2.
Understandable. Very excited about Jaden Daniels and the Commanders this year. I've said it a lot on this program, not to get too far off topic, but contrary to some of my jokes, I'd love nothing more than for the Washington franchise to be good again and for that fan base to have something to get excited about, reinvigorate their spirits. So with that, Aiden, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to jump in and kind of mention that, as far as we were talking last week about guys that we wanted to see break out, especially some of these younger or newer players. And I think as I think back to that list that we were running down, I'm not sure that there was anybody we wanted to see something from that we didn't. All of us kind of got our wish a little bit with everything that we rattled off right there. And the thing that I found especially encouraging about this game, and the thing I liked about how Kalen DeBoer is changing the approach to getting your depth involved in the game from the Nick Saban era, is you saw the young guys early. I don't think that against Georgia, you'll see Quay Russaw making tackles for loss on the opening defensive drive. Maybe, I don't know what his game plan is for the rest of the season, Kalen DeBoer's or Kane Womack's, but it just felt to me like, they knew, like, hey, this is supposed to be a cupcake game. Let's not act like it's a cupcake game, but let's get some guys in there and let them start getting some, meaningful minutes early in this game before the other team starts putting backups in for fresh legs and they kind of quit mentally,
Yeah. And if you're Western Kentucky, there's some extent, no disrespect, some extent, especially after TJ Finley puts you in an early hole, because I thought they drove the ball pretty well, throughout the game when their foot was on the gas pedal in that regard. But I think that one of your goals, especially after it gets out of hand, is to emerge healthy. Like you mentioned, putting in fresh legs, I think you just you want to get back on the bus. You take your licking to a certain extent, and you're going to have guys sore, you're going to have guys this, that, and the other. That's a natural part of the game, but nothing serious. Nothing's going to keep guys out. Next week, which I got some petty drama going on with Eastern Kentucky right now, and beyond.
Yeah. Stuff like this. Yeah. Like you mentioned, it is kind of a cupcake game. There was some excitement coming into it. But yeah, I think, just for this defense, especially, we don't know. There's a lot of questions about who is actually going to step up on the field. So getting all of those guys, getting especially some of the younger guys in there to go out there, try to make plays, it's important because those guys are going to be rotational pieces later in the season. Probably the one guy that I was a little disappointed we didn't get to see any of really was Keon Keeley. That guy's on a lot of people's list to be like a super, big time breakout defensive end. Didn't really get to see any of him. I believe he was injured. I don't even think he took a snap on Saturday.
Not that I know of.
Yeah. So, unfortunate that we didn't get to see him. Hopefully he can rest up, be healthy, get on the field in time for this South Florida game, and then possibly for that trip up to Madison. But overall, defense played really well. Really good to get used to subbing players in, because when you get into the thick of the SEC season and you have quarterbacks like Nico and Jackson Dart and even the Garrett Nussmeyers of the world going out there and just slinging the ball around, you're going to need fresh players to go out there, be able to put pressure on the quarterback. You can't have guys walking around with their hands on their hips. And because it just opens it up to just a big old can of worms. And we saw that when LSU played on Sunday. Those guys were just exhausted. USC was able to just run the ball right down their throat for pretty much the entirety of the second half.
What was it, the last 3 drives? They marched
Yeah.
right down the field, like something like 50-plus rushing yards on each one of those drives.
Yeah, so, if you have young guys that can step in, be quality depth pieces very early on in their careers, it is important to get those guys on the field, especially with the level of talent that you're bringing into the program. 4 or 5-star guys, they should be seeing the field to some extent. Maybe not every down starters, but get them rotational minutes just to, at bare minimum, give your top guys a breather.
Well, and in addition to the sort of health management of your roster, the other thing that that's important for is this is the NIL era. This is the transfer portal era. We talk about the talent level of the players that come in and are depth pieces at places like Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and I think in years past, especially during the peak of the Saban era and the genesis of it, I think you could sort of say like, hey, you come in, you're a freshman, sophomore, you got to earn your spot, earn your time, sit on the bench, put your time in. That guy right there, he's a junior, he's a senior, he's done the same thing you're going to do for the next 2 seasons. And so he's going to get the nod every time. And I think guys were more able to stomach that pill because they couldn't just go anywhere without sitting for a year. There wasn't, agents calling them every 30 minutes or so with different NIL offers. And on top of that, it was just a different attitude. It was a different generation of player. This is a new era, not just NIL, not just the transfer portal. This is a whole new generation of players. These were millennial players we were talking about 15 years ago. These are Gen Z players now. And it's just a different social structure. Not to make a dig or a knock at anybody, but, you've got to handle them differently. You have to manage these players differently than you had to in eras past. So it's nice to see Kalen DeBoer, for all the, medical stuff we can talk about and all the player development stuff we can talk about. It's nice to see him kind of, maybe make the guys feel like they're actually getting to do something so they don't need to go play at, Boise State next year.
I think the realities involved are pretty stark. And you pointed that out, and it's absolutely true. And I think, part of that is the NCAA, will there be rules? Will there not be rules? So far leaning in the latter direction over the last number of years. It used to be so restrictive to transfer and play. The only times you could do it and not sit for a year were if you were a grad transfer. And that, that used to be what that was all about. And then, 2-time transfers virtually unheard of. 6-year players virtually unheard of. And I know with the COVID year and all that, different conversations, other rumors coming out that maybe the NCAA is looking at adding a 5th year permanently, which, that just reeks of, one lane will fix the traffic. One extra lane will fix the traffic.
Yeah.
If you guys catch my drift. But
no, that was a good one. No, you haven't had one that good in a while. No, I'm going to give you flowers on that one. Snap that up.
Snap that one up.
I appreciate that, guys. But I think, and those are all checkpoints you can hit on based on what you just said. Because at Alabama, you stand to lose so much if some of these guys, even that are on, even on the 3 deep, for crying out loud. I mean, at one point in the distant past, that was Quinnen Williams, and look what he turned into.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Pretty sure he was on that list of 2018 second contracts that was floating around today. So
right, pretty big, pretty big contracts.
Yeah, those guys.
Big contract, big man.
Yep, guys made a lot of money. Have been doing pretty well for themselves in the NFL. But one guy that did pretty well for himself this past Saturday is Jalen Milroe. We haven't really gotten into his performance. Early last season, he definitely struggled. Was not really hitting the easy throws, stuff like that. The receivers this past Saturday made a lot of those throws pretty easy. They were creating some separation. He was really pushing the ball down the field. They were talking during the game, pre-game as well, about him having one of the best deep balls in college football, and he absolutely showed that off. Pretty much was just going out there and slinging it around the yard. Just pretty much having fun with it. I mean, completed 7 of 9 passes for 200 yards.
That's why I'm sitting
3
here.
touchdowns.
I'm like, I have no opinion, no
Yeah, I mean,
evaluation. What are you gonna say? It was a
and then
preseason game.
Essentially it was. I mean, the dude also had 79 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. I mean, he should be. You look at guys that I think they've released updated Heisman odds and all that kind of stuff. Statistically speaking, he's right up there with the rest of the guys. I'm excited to see him play in a real football game in 2 weeks. The shellacking that they put on, in Bryant-Denny against Western Kentucky on this past Saturday, and Western Kentucky is, or at least in previous years, has been no slouch of a Group of 5 football team. I worry that we're going to see another pretty boring game against South Florida this upcoming Saturday, even with the quote unquote revenge game after the historically poor performance in Tampa last year. I just don't think that the Tide is going to play the Bulls even remotely close.
Yeah, and like for all we can say about the big plays, if we can go back to Jalen Milroe for a second, for all the things we can say about the big playability, the deep ball and the scrambling, and how his stats are going to stack up in the Heisman conversation, because let's be honest, 200 passing yards to get to your 3 touchdowns in 9 snaps or nine touches. Honestly, that's not going to help him come, December when we're having that conversation. The fact that he didn't go for 450 yards in a stat padding game. But I digress. I think the thing that's going to go underappreciated here is the efficiency of Jalen Milroe. 10 carries of the football, 9 passes of the football. It's 19 times that he directly ran the play himself, whether he threw the ball down the field or he ran it down the field. Ball was in his hands. 19 times, 5 touchdowns. More than 20% of the time that he is in control of the football on a play, Alabama scored a touchdown on Saturday. And I get it. Again, we're going to say a lot that it's Western Kentucky, because clearly Western Kentucky wasn't, maybe on par with Vanderbilt per se, like they would normally be considered to be. Yeah, that's the truth of the matter. Although, shout out Vandy for shutting everybody up in Blacksburg. I guess we'll touch on that in a little bit. But I just don't think that he's gonna get his flowers for that, and that's crazy. That's something that should be acknowledged. Just how veteran that is to go out there and be like, all right, yeah, we're just gonna get this done.
Take care of business.
Right. It's supposed to be an easy game. Fine. I'm going to score with as little effort as possible.
Will, do you have anything to add about the Tide?
I think that in terms of Jalen Milroe, I'm with you guys. I was impressed. I really was. And I still think that he's going to show out this year. And I mean, I don't want to discredit the performance that he did have. I think you saw a team in Western Kentucky that, as a lot of people expected, was extremely overmatched. I don't know that there was any intimidation. I don't know that there were tons of jitters. I think objectively, it's hard to evaluate these kind of games for the elite quarterbacks in the country, and that's one of the detriments of a guarantee game like this. I think that the positives are he did what he was supposed to do. If he'd gone out there and had a TJ Finley-esque performance, there's no doubt I'm here in Tuscaloosa. There's no doubt the walls would be collapsing around me right now, and that's not happening. So that's a plus. I look forward to seeing what he'll do next week. First time playing against South Florida. A lot of people remember he didn't play in last year's game, whatever you want to call that effort. It did not have Jalen Milroe's name on the official box score, and now it will. So we'll
giant see. Game. It was like a giant muddy game of like Smear the Queer that you play in the backyard of the church or something on Easter.
Yeah,
that's what it looked like.
Yeah, it was just a miserable experience all around. Hopefully, and speaking of miserable experience, I don't know if you were watching the A&M Notre Dame game this past Saturday, but I got to see Tyler Buckner on the sidelines, throwing his hands up, doing all that with the green bib on a couple of times. So just, made me very happy to see him thriving in a new program. But yeah, I mean, I expect a lot of the same. They're not going to be going down to Tampa this Saturday. They're going to be playing in Bryant-Denny. Crowd should be sparse. It's not the opening game of the season. It is another late kickoff, 6 p.m. kickoff on ESPN, back-to-back weeks. Whether they deserve that spot or not, who knows? But they're going to be there, and everyone except DirecTV customers is going to be able to see it.
Hey, remember to be nice to the DirecTV rep when you called a bitch at them. All right. That's a human being that's not sure if they're going to be able to pay their cell phone bill this month too. Okay, just like chill the heck out a little bit. All right, but apparently you get free stuff if you call and complain about not being able to get the Alabama game. So we encourage you to do that at this program. Guys, moving on. I know that some of you are going to have a hard time believing this, but programs other than Western Kentucky and the University of Alabama played football games on Saturday. Some of those games were entertaining to a degree, and we should probably talk about them. Guys, do you want to start out with like the most exaggerated blowout and then work our way to the good games? Or do you want to start with the good games and, just kind of pitter through the more exaggerated blowouts at the end? How do we want to do this here?
Let's go ahead. I would like to get into some of the better football games, personally speaking.
All right.
Do you have a direction you want to start off with? How about one of the early games from Saturday's slate?
Well, I'm gonna be honest with you. It was Saturday, so I don't really entirely remember what time of day these games were at. But I feel like if we want to do the good games, we should go with the closest one right off the rip. And I think that would be the 27-20 somewhat upset of the LSU Tigers by the USC Trojans.
Yeah. LSU played in a standalone game on a Sunday night in week 1 of college football under Brian Kelly. And they lost again. This was the game that, a lot more people had LSU going out there and winning this game. I had LSU going out there and winning this game. Garrett Nussmeier and Miller Moss both played exceptionally well this past Sunday. Let's not discredit what LSU did, what Garrett Nussmeier did. I mean, 30 of 39 for 308, 2 touchdowns. Miller Moss, 27-36, 378, 1 touchdown. If this game was played last year, we would have gotten to see 2 Heisman Trophy winners play in the game. But, new quarterbacks for both of these teams. Both quarterbacks played phenomenal. LSU just scored with too much time on the clock there at the end, and USC was able to go down. It really put an exclamation point on that win at the end of the game. Not just going out there and kicking the field goal to win it, but rushing a touchdown right through the heart of the LSU defense. LSU had a lot of defensive problems last year. They could not stop the run whatsoever. This past Sunday, it was just more of the same. I don't know where Brian Kelly goes, from here. He got very upset at the post-game press conference.
Boo-hoo.
He's just struggled to win a lot of big games in his career. And this is just another one to add to the list.
Brian Kelly, it's still weird to me that he's the LSU coach.
Yeah.
I mean, that'll never not be strange to me. But I also don't see a whole ton of difference in the results relative to Les Miles. At Orgeron, Les Miles, I'll always wonder why he even got fired. I think they'd do the same thing over again because of what happened in 2019. It's difficult to say you do it differently. But in Brian Kelly's case, you wanted him to be able to win these big games. And maybe the thought was by putting him in a program like LSU with some of the resources, some of the recruiting base, that Notre Dame doesn't have, for example, the Texas pipeline, Florida pipeline, that he'd be able to get over the hump in some of these. That just didn't happen. And you had the number 1 and number 2 weird 2021 cycle coaching changes going at it with Lincoln Riley on the other side at USC in a game that I would say he needed to win very badly.
Yeah.
And Miller Moss played really good football. I was surprised by that, but he played really well. I'm not super high on LSU as a whole. I'm not super high on Garrett Nussmeier. I don't know that really moved appreciably with this past game. I don't think they're a bad football team. I'm not stunned they lost. I expected them to win. Um, who knows? That's the difficulty of playing these Power Four games so early in the year, and that's why one of the reasons. There are a lot of reasons naturally, but one of the reasons why a lot of schools don't do it. And I think LSU is one of the teams that's probably going to stand on a street corner with a sign strapped to its chest saying, "Hey, don't do this." That's what you're seeing now after the first few years of the Brian Kelly era.
I think Brian Kelly might be in a picture perfect example of the phrase "wherever you go, there you are" right now. It probably really didn't matter what program Brian Kelly was in. 10-2, not making the playoff, although now you have the 12-team playoff, but 10-2, not being one of the top 4 teams in December and playing in a pretty good bowl game is about what you should expect from a Brian Kelly team. There it is, plain and simple. If it's not one thing, it's another. If it's not you collapsed at the end of the season in the moment where you needed to shine and pull through and finish the job, if it's not that, it's you didn't actually get your team in shape during the offseason, and now the first month of the season, you can't finish games against tough competition. If it's not all that, maybe you had some freak injury or whatever. If it's not all that, you just get out-coached, trying to be cute, trying to do silly crap, all right? And if it's not all that, you run into Nick Saban in Alabama, all right? Well, that's happened to Brian Kelly a handful of times in his career. I just, this is it. This is what I expect from Brian Kelly at this point. And if you're LSU, the thing that really sucks is I look around college football and I don't see anybody that's going to do any better.
No, Brian Kelly. Let's not mince this. He is a good college football coach.
Yes.
I will never sit here and say that Brian Kelly is a bad college football coach. That man has won a lot of football games. Man has been to the playoff. Man has played in a national championship game. They did get shellacked in said game, but he coached in it. This LSU team, the past couple of years, it's just been 9-3. But this year, the difference is you don't have a guy like Jaden Daniels to save you in some of those closer games that you otherwise would have lost. Garrett Nussmeier is very capable of being a good quarterback in the Southeastern Conference this season. He's not going to lead the country in total yards. He's not going to throw for 4,000 and rush for another 1,000 like Jaden Daniels pretty much did last season. So you're going to have to find other ways to win football games. LSU used to do that with their defense. The defense is not up to LSU standards. All the LSU fans down here in the 251, huge fan base region for LSU fans, are all just in disbelief that this happened. You had every possible chance to win this football game. You should have kicked the field goal on your opening drive. Back-to-back seasons, they went down there and they had a 4th and goal and could have just taken the points. And Brian Kelly did not learn from his mistake last year, and he decided to go for it again and did not get it.
It's silly.
Does it matter in the long run? They lost by 7 points, but that could have changed the whole way the game played out. I know Dan Mullen mentioned that during the halftime and post-game show. They lost John Emery Jr., fresh off he tore his right ACL last season. Reports coming out today that he tore his left ACL in the game on Sunday. Was their leading rusher, a guy that they were turning to a lot during this game. Only 61 yards on the ground, but he earned every single one of those. Looked really good. Kyron Lacy's going to be playing football on Sundays. Going to be one of the best receivers in the country. Going to put up a ton of numbers. But hopefully they're not just empty stats, because by the time they play Alabama, they already have 4 losses on their schedule. And I don't think that's what's going to happen. But if the defense just does not pick it up at all, then it's definitely a possibility.
Well, last year you at least had the excuse that they were injured.
Yeah.
LSU defense last year, one of the most injured single units I can recall, and it affected things. Whether people want to chalk that up as the main reason that maybe LSU didn't perform on a level commensurate with having a dynamic Heisman winning quarterback or not. I do. I think that's a big part of the reason why. But this year, what's it going to be? I mean, I think the jig is up for Brian Kelly. I've made no secret of it. I'm not the biggest fan of the guy. He can always make it to the big game, right? I mean, that's a uniquely Brian Kelly experience.
Ticket promoters love him.
Yeah, and he can always be one half of the marquee like he was this past Sunday in Las Vegas. And I mean, it's just one of those things. I mean, and it's not that he hasn't had talented teams, or like Hardy said, he's won a lot of ball games. You just have to wonder, I mean, it's who the guy is. It's who the guy is, right?
Well, it's almost like it's almost like those '90s Bills teams. At what point does it go from like, that's a crazy good football team, man? You were one of the best two teams in the league 4 years in a row. That's crazy, man. At what point does it go from that to, dude, 4 years in a row and you couldn't win one of them? Where was that point for Brian Kelly? Where do you think in his career that we as a collective got to the point that, like, all right, dude, you've been to the big game and not won so many times that, like, and now this is starting to be a worse look for you than just not getting to the game often enough.
I'm probably going to have an unpopular opinion about this, or maybe one that a lot of people haven't thought about. And I apologize for that if it sounds like I'm digging a little bit too deep here. But I think the answer you're looking for, Aiden, is the 2017 regular season game, Miami and Notre Dame at Hard Rock Stadium. Notre Dame, the year prior to this, had gone 4-8, and terrible would be being polite to them. They had a number of bad games, bottled one to Navy, pretty funny stuff.
Team, okay.
One of their 4 wins was, just beating up on Army in the Alamo Dome with, get in price under $10. DeShone Kizer went to the NFL off that platform year. I don't understand who he had in his corner giving him that advice. He needs to make like Deontay Wilder and fire Mark Breland, which I don't think Deontay should have fired Mark Breland. The analogy was just there. But the following year, Notre Dame did a lot of nice things. Brandon Wimbush is the starting quarterback. They had a really good football team. They lost to Georgia by 1 point in one of the most hyped regular season games in history. A fantastic game. Absolutely incredible football game. Ended up, I think, 7-1, either 6-1 or 7-1. Ranked number 3 in the country, going to Miami. The Miami team was good, and they were ranked around 7th at that time. In and out of the top 10, later as high as number 2 before losing to Pitt. But that would come later. Notre Dame and Miami under the lights seemed like was going to be absolutely fantastic. I mean, we all know, Catholics versus convicts and all that. Didn't have quite that same level of vitriol, but the game was a playoff eliminator. Most relevant Miami has been in my lifetime. I was not alive, in 2001. Miami walked all over them. It was not even a contest. I don't remember what the final score was. I think it was 40.
I've got it pulled up. 41-8.
Wow.
Notre Dame got absolutely shellacked in that game. Had to go find it. That's definitely a game you can point to. But I mean, he did make it to the college football playoff. After that, it was the COVID season.
He did the next year too.
Yeah.
I think it was one of those things. You saw his propensity to lay an egg translate into the regular season, which so often you had seen his teams at many schools, Cincinnati, be really, really good in the regular season, and then they lose the bowl game. The various New Year's Six and or upper tier bowl competition and they get beat. This was when it carried over to the regular season. And this isn't losing to Georgia by a point when your stadium undergoes a very embarrassing, by the way, shame on Notre Dame ticket holders, hostile takeover. This was a game in which you were playing against a team that was highly overrated, and you got absolutely shellacked.
Yeah. I mean, look, what LSU decides to do from here is really up in the air because, as Aiden mentioned, you look around the state of college football right now, and of course, I'm sure some either Group of Five or other Power Five coach is going to make a name for themselves this season. If Miami does end up in the college football playoff, does LSU go out there, take a chance on a guy like Mario Cristobal? Who knows? That's just a name to throw out there.
Did you just suggest that with any amount of sincerity?
It would be a panic move, but if Mario Cristobal gets them to the playoff, and I imagine, the way Miami looked on Saturday, the way Cam Ward is going to look the rest of the season, they're probably going to finish either undefeated or possibly with one loss in the ACC. They were my pick to win the ACC this season. They looked every bit the part on Florida when they whooped up on the Gators. And that's just, that would be just an idea. I'm sure there would be some other coaches out there that would absolutely take the LSU job, but you can't just fire Brian Kelly after 3 seasons, especially with what the buyout is. He's been to an SEC championship game. He's had a Heisman Trophy winner. They fired Ed Orgeron after winning a national championship. So, who knows?
Let's talk about that game, guys, while we're on the subject, because that's the job that everybody feels will be open, not just this year in general, but, potentially by this time, 2 months from now in November 4th, we could potentially have the Florida job being, or there'll be an interim, obviously, but the job will be, for all intents and purposes, open. Florida with an opportunity to make a real statement on Saturday against Miami at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. It didn't happen, and again, it really wasn't that close. Cam Ward looked the part of a bona fide Heisman contender. Very excited about him. I think this Miami team, especially after what we saw from Clemson, will win the ACC this season, and maybe, just maybe, they'll have some more timely handoffs and play calls, and they won't bumble games that they should have won, like we saw last year. But Florida, obviously, we know the red flags were flying. The wind is blowing really hard. But had they won the game against Miami on Saturday, maybe, you could have put the force field up for a little bit, stop some of the noise, and the effort was listless. Didn't seem like a lot of inspiration. Graham Mertz obviously, got banged up pretty good. Just a bad day at the office for Florida in all respects. And I think it's not the beginning of the end, because that has clearly already happened. But the boulder is tumbling down. I don't feel the momentum can be reversed.
And it's going to serve as a cautionary tale to other blue blood programs in college football in this modern era for Florida, because Florida's been bad in the past. Let's not act like Florida's never had downturns. We've even had a couple recently, but I think this is the worst I can remember Florida being in my lifetime. They're not even competitive, and I'd imagine they wouldn't be competitive with probably the upper quarter or third of Group of 5 teams at this point, where they're at right now as a program. And there's a time where it would have been absolutely insane of you to say that, because, well, the resources and the infrastructure in place at Florida, in the college football structure of the past.
And Hugh Hathcock.
Yeah.
Him, sorry for his wife, but just everything that was in place there, it would have been impossible to conceive of them falling this far. But in the modern era where, there's NIL and there's the transfer portal, and, and being a blue blood doesn't matter anymore. Everybody's got really nice facilities, and your coach can go anywhere. Anybody can drum up a bag from a booster that made it big on an early tech startup investment and, go get whoever the hell they want to coach your football team. Bill O'Brien is calling plays for Boston College.
And doing
the
a
man
fine job of it.
He really
Absolutely.
is.
Did a
Tremendous
fantastic job.
like that's a legitimate football coach, So and Boston College right now has a substantially better chance of winning the ACC than Florida does of finishing in the top half of the SEC. It's just
Or
crazy to say.
finishing bowl eligible. No, I think I have one point, Hardy. I want you to get in on this discussion momentarily. I think one small point I'd like to make: Blue Bloods don't like to hire a group of 5 coaches, and you saw Florida do it with Billy Napier, and he's a guy that had a lot of hype. Great season at Louisiana during the COVID year. I was on that train.
Yeah,
I turned down the Auburn job. Bullet dodged for Auburn by the looks of it. Now, granted, I think they might still want the flyer based on how it actually happened. It's so strange. We pose these hypotheticals in this discussion, and yet it still seems like maybe they still would have fallen into place the way they did. But I think you're seeing why. Hardy?
So at the end of this Florida-Miami game, after Florida gets absolutely shellacked in their own stadium, Miami players walked over to all of the recruits that Florida brought into this game. Because, big time game, try to bring in as many, huge recruits as you can. After Miami absolutely skull drug them, they walked over to those recruits and started talking to them and be like, do not come play at Florida. Come play at Miami. This is Miami looks to be a program on the upswing, possibly finally. I mean, they look to be on the upswing through the first half of last season before a very tragic collapse following the Georgia Tech loss. Are they going to be able to maintain that upswing a little bit longer this season? Who knows? Cam Ward is a better football player than Tyler Van Dyke. Bama fans will get to see Van Dyke play Wisconsin, and I guess not this upcoming Saturday, but the following. There's a lot of optimism for this Miami program. I mean, look, Florida, I've talked about it before. Billy Napier is not going to make – I mean, they're going to lose to UCF. They're going to lose 2 in-state games this season in the Swamp. After the second one happens to a program that many people would call far inferior, although they've won a national championship more recently than Florida, then you can – I mean, he's not going to make it out of Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. If Billy Napier wants to save his job, and I've talked to both of y'all about this, he has to put every single egg he possibly has in the DJ Lagway basket, who has just been announced as the starter for this upcoming weekend against Samford. He'll get a tune-up game before he goes through the gauntlet for the rest of the season, and I assume he will stay at Florida and be the starting quarterback for whoever gets the Florida job after Billy Napier is fired. If he doesn't go out there and just put on an absolute show the rest of the season and save Billy Napier's job, because that's essentially what Billy Napier is going to have to bank on.
What a story that would be.
I mean, now, if DJ Lagway goes out there and balls out, wins them, 8 games somehow, I really don't think they're going to win a game in the back 6 games of that schedule, maybe the Kentucky game, but other than that, don't see them winning a lot of football games. That would be a big-time story, big-time turnaround. But some people might point to the Graham Mertz injury and say Billy Napier gets a bit of a rain check on his firing from the season, because now he's able to turn and say, but my starting quarterback got injured, the guy that I was training to, preparing to be the number 1 guy the whole offseason, he just got hurt. Who knows if Graham Mertz will really make it back out. But I remember 3 seasons ago, Anthony Richardson stepped on the field and looked like the better quarterback between himself and Emory Jones, and they refused to play Anthony Richardson. This season, DJ Lagway is going to get that opportunity to go out there and just ball out, be the 5-star plus number 1 dual threat quarterback that he came into Gainesville as. And if he performs, he can write his name in Florida history, be a 3+ year quarterback for that program and possibly lead them to a lot of wins.
I think it should be noted at this time in the program that like Hardy was actually angry about the Emory Jones Anthony Richardson thing back in the day. Like
Well,
that
who
negatively
wouldn't be though?
that like actually affected your mood in a negative manner whenever that would come up in conversation.
Because it was, I mean, you could watch them play on Saturdays, and it's one of the things where it's like, are you trying to win football games because you aren't putting the more talented, more dynamic player out on the field? I know
It was a legitimate question. No, absolutely.
Yeah,
It just always cracked me up every time.
Yeah, and I mean, people can talk about Anthony Richardson not being able to hit the broadside of a barn when he played quarterback at Florida, but that doesn't matter. His rushing ability was good enough to make up for that fact, especially when he was just a tick lower on the passer rating than Emory Jones, who has bounced around a couple of college football teams since he left Florida. Anthony Richardson is now going to be playing on Sundays for the Colts. So we can talk about that all you want.
Same debate though at Alabama with, all respect to the parties involved, maybe a different talent level than Anthony Richardson. But I can't believe this was 10 years ago. But, Blake Sims and Jake Coker, when that was going on, everybody and their mother is going through summer camp, fall camp, thinking, yeah, Jake Coker, he's going to be A.J. McCarron's successor. And, then Blake Sims is the starting quarterback. And, I think that at that point in time, he was playing better. And we saw Nick Saban, and Nick Saban had a real propensity for paying attention to practice, which, of course, any coach worth his salt would, except apparently this Emory Jones, Anthony Richardson stuff. But you saw it last year when Tyler Buchner had practiced really well. For those in doubt as to why he got a start, there's your answer. Tyler Buchner was an A1 practice player.
Scout team All-American.
Right, exactly. And Saban took notice of that stuff. But once you actually got in between the hash marks, Blake just was better too at that point in their respective careers. And it didn't matter that, Coker had transferred in and with the expectation that he would be the starting quarterback that year. And that team went on to have a lot of success. He went on to have a lot of success. I've spoken to him personally about this, and he acknowledged there were a lot of feelings. There are going to be, and I think that's the thing to remember. These are college kids, and there's that element as well. But I think he understood, and I think when it comes to the other side of the coin, like we're discussing, it makes you wonder why. If somebody's being kept off the field that maybe has distinctly separated themselves, it makes you wonder.
Sometimes, the answer could just be simple. There's a lot of different controversies and underlying weird, dramatic, and interpersonal things and conflicts that could be. And sometimes the coach is bad at evaluating talent.
It's always a possibility. But with the Graham Mertz, DJ Lagway stuff, getting back to this upcoming weekend, big game against Stanford, Florida, will win that game. If they lose that game, Billy Napier will be fired this weekend.
I don't know whether you're joking, Hardy, but I think that's a correct statement. I believe that would happen.
Yes. If they somehow drop the ball off the face of the earth and lost that game, the whole team should just be fired. But going back to
Gator Collective will be in the kind of shambles that you only see in apocalyptic paintings.
Jaden Rashada will remove him from from his lawsuit.
Yeah, or really any Sunday following an Alabama loss during the Nick Saban era.
Or the USF game.
Yes.
No, that was worse.
Yeah, any of those questions. But, DJ Lagway is going to get the opportunity to go out there, show the talent that he has, be the guy. And one guy that absolutely showed the part at his new school this past Saturday, 251 legend, Fairhope native Riley Leonard stepped into Kyle Field against his former head coach, who is now coaching the Texas A&M Aggies, and gets a big-time win on the road. One of the biggest wins of the Marcus Freeman era at Notre Dame. Tough loss for the Aggies coming off a head coach in Jimbo Fisher that also couldn't seem to win a lot of the big games. Connor Wigman, 12 of 30, 100 yards, 2 interceptions.
Lord, he just might not be very good.
There's a real possibility he's just not very good. But, this game was a field goal battle back and forth throughout most of the game. And then Notre Dame took that late lead, that late surge. Guys, do we have anything to really touch on with this game? Mike Elko versus Riley Leonard was a big-time story coming into this game. Huge for Notre Dame's college football playoff chances, getting a win like this in Kyle Field.
I was really wrong about how Riley Leonard would play in this game. And, I not only do I own that, obviously, I look back and I don't know if I should have been surprised. That's a good quarterback.
He's a good football player.
I think you look at Duke last year and the start they got off to, and, they caused some bad breaks midway through the season. I'm reminded, ironically, of the Notre Dame game, which was a good football game. But, I think that for doubters, it just might be time to accept that Riley Leonard is in the upper echelon of quarterbacks. And for Mike Elko, man, what a disappointment. Not just from who you're playing, but to get off your first game and have it be, a home non-conference Power 4 game, a lot of bright lights, pageantry, etc., college game day. And regardless of the manner, you get beat. That's going to be a bitter taste. Obviously, nothing is over for them per se, but that's one you wanted to get if you're him specifically, and that didn't happen. But it was an enjoyable game. I didn't get to catch any of it. I was working in Alabama. I did watch the highlights afterwards, watch kind of the condensed games that people put out, which is an underrated public service out there on the internet today, all across college football. But I think that's what's going to stick with Texas A&M in the immediate future, and is just a disappointment from losing a game that sentimentally you felt like you had to have. And you got them at your place, and you couldn't get it done. And that was a Notre Dame game to lose. Like, if Brian Kelly is the coach at Notre Dame, are we entirely convinced that Notre Dame wins that game? We had a whole soliloquy about this, and I don't think I'm convinced.
I'll go as far as to say I am convinced that they would lose.
Yes. Big-time win for Marcus Freeman. He lost the really close game against Ohio State last year. I believe that game was in the Horseshoe.
Was.
Fantastic game overall. Notre Dame has had 2 back-to-back guys, or back-to-back seasons, had a quarterback transfer from an ACC school to play for the Fighting Irish. Has started off the season on a very, very strong note. Sam Hartman did so last year. Riley Leonard, let me just double-check this real quick. That was the first game he had played since the end of October. He finished the season hurt. Did not play Duke's final,
7 games?
6 games, including the bowl game that they played in. So to come out here after pretty much having nearly a year of not playing, off of a really big-time injury, says a lot to the level of quarterback that he is. I know he did not get in the end zone, didn't throw for a passing or rush for a touchdown, but he just played the game at a very, very high level, did all the little things right to help the Fighting Irish win a football game that I know some people didn't have them winning, but got the job done. I'm excited to see what they do for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame and some of their schedules have been pretty difficult. That game was pretty difficult on paper. They won, which is all. Not only is it a big confidence boost, it's also just something that's out of the way.
Yeah.
And I see Notre Dame as now as a really strong potential playoff team. And I don't know, man. The ACC,
It's kind of in shambles, man.
right? Who knows what you really will have? So even with their
Your ACC championship game might be Georgia Tech and Boston College.
No,
well,
Miami
let's
is
hope
going to
so,
be
because
there.
that would be hilarious.
If that was the case, that would be hilarious. But I think.
How about Brent Key versus Bill O'Brien, the two guys with Alabama ties going after each other in the ACC title game for a playoff spot, where regardless of who wins, gentlemen, I want this to sink in because this is really something that has real gravity if this does happen, where regardless of who wins, either Georgia Tech or Boston College will be in the college football playoff.
Which, hey, I mean, if Georgia Tech can maintain a high level of play, pretty much execute the way that they did against Florida State, which now it seems like everybody in the country is going to be able to do against Florida State, then, sure, who knows? They might catch a lucky break in their second round matchup after receiving a bye. But I mean, look, would Notre Dame get the edge in that situation since they're kind of ACC affiliated? Do you think playoff committee would give them some kind of leeway for that, first round bye in that kind of situation? Do we think that
I think
is
some of the reporting I've read, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that what I've been reading as the details of the 12-team playoff have come out is that there's pretty much no way for Notre Dame to have a first round bye.
Okay. Yeah, just wanted to double check that because, I mean, that's definitely a storyline that could, lead to Notre Dame finally joining a conference. The ACC currently has an odd number of football teams. They're pretty much waiting on Notre Dame to get off work, punch their ticket with this independent stuff, and just finally join the ACC. Would bring a
I think it would be silly. I think it would be silly for them to do so. Just from a money perspective. I mean, look, we've talked about this a handful of times. I don't know that I've ever made this stump, but the truth of the matter is maybe besides the SEC, there's no conference whose collective brand is bigger than Notre Dame's individual brand. Notre Dame could get itself more money independently on a TV deal than it can.
And they do.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And they already do. That can continue because it's not just, the people that went to your university. It's not just the region surrounding a locality that's your fan base. It's one of the largest and oldest religions in the world and one of the largest religions in the United States. That is a majority of your fan base. The people that follow that creed tend to be fans of your school.
And it carries some
of its. Yeah, it does, and it brings
an NHL game played at that stadium. Fantastic game, by the way, between the Blackhawks and the Bruins in 2019. Absolutely fantastic atmosphere there. I think, though, to your point, Aiden, I mean, that's always what stopped Notre Dame from just outright saying we will join the ACC in football. They do it in other sports. It's worked pretty well. Especially when the basketball team is good, you have a team that's right up in the relevant which, mind you, it's been a while, but is right up there in conversations with Duke and Carolina, and that will always help your profile from a hoop standpoint, regardless of who it is. I think the arrangement is beneficial where it stands right now, though. I mean, in Notre Dame before that was obviously part of the Big East and those other sports, and that was good too. You had Syracuse, you had Louisville, you had some of these other programs. Notre Dame, though, is a brand first at this point. I mean, and why not? I mean, they ride on it, and why shouldn't they? I feel like as we enter the waning moments of this program, we need to encourage a certain college football tweeter of the Florida State fan base to fulfill his stated obligations.
Yes, I agree. One thing to note, I think summer of 2036. If Notre Dame does decide to join the ACC, is when they would do it. That is when the ACC TV rights deal expires. They signed that massive contract a couple of years ago. It was like a 15-year deal. Already it's starting to look like they signed a contract that was way too long. But if Notre Dame does decide to join the ACC, it'll probably be that summer or maybe a year or two prior before when they sign that new TV deal, because just adding a Notre Dame to that would just shoot the money up, and NBC would definitely be able to pitch in for some of those ACC rights.
But is Notre Dame going to take away their virtual guarantee that unless they're one of the last 4 teams in, but if Notre Dame finishes as a top 6 team, as they tend to, if for no other reason than many AP journalists.
We had this discussion last week about would you rather take the bye or play a home game at your own stadium?
Money, brother. We're talking about money. They want to play the home game.
You can play the home game. We'll see how this 12-team playoff, ends up working itself out. But yeah, very excited to see it in the long run. Excited to see which one of these ACC teams makes it out. If it's not Miami, but any final words before we wrap things up here?
Yes,
this upcoming Saturday.
Very excited for the South Florida game coming up. But I think Alabama is going to trounce them. But nevertheless, should be fun. I would encourage 3-2-1 Noel. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. Just get it over with, man. Just get it over with.
Do your job.
You hear that, Bucko? Eat shit. All right. Lacrosse playoffs Saturday. I think the first game happens at a point in time on Saturday, and the second game also happens at a point in time on Saturday, but the second game will be later than the first game. So really riveting stuff there, I know. But they're playing lacrosse on Saturday. It's going to be the Maryland Whipsnakes versus the New York Atlas, and the Utah Archers versus the Carolina Chaos for the PLL semifinal games in Long Island, New York. The winner of those 2 games will face off in the PLL championship in Philadelphia the following Saturday. So good lacrosse. I encourage people to watch it. Beats the hell out of watching Virginia Tech, apparently. So on that terrible disappointment,